dogma lesson just not bothering to plan? That's a question for TEFLologists. When I read this book, is it better to skim or scan? That's a question for TEFLologists. Can you be a good teacher if you have a CELTA? Or should you invest in an MA or a Delta? From politics to methodology, we'll discuss them all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to another episode of TEFLology, a podcast about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL Pioneers.
By way of introduction to this week's TEFL Pioneers, of which there are two this week.
Okay.
Actually.
Yes, nice.
Rob, I'm going to ask you to be a teacher.
Okay.
And Matt, I'm going to ask you to be a learner.
Done.
And
It's a big stretch for us. Yes.
and Rob, I'd like you to ask this question
Okay.
to Matt and reply as you see fit.
That's nice.
Right.
Okay.
Could you do your homework?
No. It was very difficult.
Okay, now ask him the question again. Try and reply in a different way.
Okay.
Could you do your homework?
Yes. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah,
I was going to
okay.
say no in a different reason, but...
Yes. So what I'm trying to show is there's obviously problems with maybe pragmatics.
Okay.
So
Yep.
maybe for the learner, you're not quite
So,
sure
right.
what Rob's asking.
What my original idea was to answer, no, it was too difficult for me.
Right, yeah, okay. So
Or no,
that's
that was
fine.
my first... No, it was, I didn't have time for it,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
What I was trying to
Yeah.
imply with my question was, please do your homework. Like, could you do your homework, please?
Ah,
Like that.
right,
That's what
right.
I was trying to get across, but obviously
Okay.
failed twice.
Yes. Okay.
So what I'm trying to show is that there are often pragmatical problems, not just in the classroom, in general. Obviously, we say one thing to mean something else, and the hearer or the listener gets the wrong end of the stick, as it were,
Yep.
wrong end of the pragmatic stick. There is such
Beaten
a
with a
thing.
pragmatic stick.
So what I'm trying to describe is the idea of speech acts,
Right.
or speech act theory.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with speech act
Come
theory?
across it.
Yeah, I've heard the term, but I don't know much about it.
Okay,
Or any of the pioneers involved.
Okay, so well, let me tell you. So today's TEFL pioneers are John Rogers Searle, or J.R. Searle as he's perhaps commonly known,
Okay.
and John Langshaw Austin, or J.R. Austin.
Okay.
Just give you a bit of background about the two. So John Searle, was born in 1932
All right.
in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
He's still alive. He's a living pioneer.
That's a relief.
He's currently a professor in philosophy at the University of Berkeley in California. And he's noted for his contributions to social philosophy and also philosophy of the mind. However, what we're going to talk about today are his contributions to the philosophy of language.
Okay.
Appropriate?
Appropriate, yeah. And John Searle's most famous work is perhaps Speech Acts, published in 1969.
It's a long time ago.
It is, yeah. Along with Searle is John Langshaw Austin. Austin was born in 1911, and his major work was How to Do Things with Words, which was published after his death, actually, in 1962.
How to do things with words.
Also, Austin served for MI6 in the military during World War II.
All right.
And he also went on to work as a professor at Oxford University, where he held quite infamous Saturday morning lecture sort of seminars.
Right.
And these have
Infamous
become
in what way?
these have just become very well known and famous.
All right. I thought you meant they were kind of, drug-fueled orgies.
It's not infamous in that sense, but they were well thought of at the time,
Right.
regarded. So these two, perhaps together, designed or developed the idea of speech act theory.
Okay.
So I'll just give a brief overview of what speech act theory is.
Yeah.
So Searle and Austin's work came at a time when logical positivism was the prevailing kind of view of language.
Okay.
Right.
Are you aware of what that might mean?
Yeah, well, it's kind of what came before postmodernism and post-positivism.
So yeah, basically it describes kind of the true facts of language, and basically if an utterance can't be proved as being true, it has no meaning essentially. So they were
Right.
trying to describe things in very literal methods, and perhaps teaching at the time as well, maybe in the up to the 60s did very much the same thing as well, perhaps.
Right.
Can you think of any methods?
Presumably like a grammar translation method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So up to this point, things were very, very literal, I guess. And Searle and Austin wanted to say this is not always the case, obviously. And they were more concerned with what's done with language, what the effect of language was, and what the pragmatic intention was behind certain utterances.
Right.
Basically. So in 1969, Searle published his book Speech Acts, and together, obviously Austin at this point had sadly died. However, some of his work was incorporated into this book too.
Right.
And the two, before this event, the two observed that there are many things that people say that cannot meet certain conditions of truth, and that certain intentions are being performed beyond their literal meaning.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example.
So, for example, Searle equated these utterances to acts.
Okay.
He called the intention behind an utterance an act. For example, language is used to perform acts, as in we do physical actions as well to perform acts.
Yeah.
So that's what he equated it to. And he felt that these were not just grammatical structures and words, but they had something else behind them as well, some operating thrust behind them.
Is this kind of similar to, is it systemic functional linguistics, the Halliday, like in opposition to generative grammar, which is just, you have these rules and you produce reams of sentences. It's more about how language is used to, create meaning and that kind of thing.
I assume so. Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about it, but calling it an act, I think, is a really interesting way of framing it.
Yeah.
In much that the same way that we kind of talk about don't look at what somebody says, look at what they do.
Yeah.
In this case, it is what they say, but it's about the intention behind what they're saying rather than the actual words that they're using.
Yeah, right.
It's how they do things with words.
That's how they do things with words.
And these studies, they came just before notional, functional kind of syllabuses took off.
Yeah.
Right.
And Widdowson remarked at the time that Henry Widdowson, I apologise, our good friend Henry Widdowson, remarked that there seemed to be a change in focus from the sentence being the basic unit in language teaching, with regards to language teaching.
Right.
Observed that this was taking shape. Rob, you asked for examples of particular speech acts. I've just lost, there they are, speech acts. So these can be further categorised as an apology, a compliment, a complaint, an invitation, promise, or a request.
Right.
Okay.
For example.
Yeah, that's right.
And that idea of not looking at it grammatically, so not, an utterance doesn't have to be a fully grammatical sentence.
No.
I guess it rarely is.
Yeah. And obviously this doesn't just refer to oral English, obviously written English too, emails perhaps. There's been a lot of recent studies into discourse analysis of emails.
Right.
As well, and looking at the speech acts at play within particular emails, or also social media these days as well. There's been a lot of studies.
Right.
So it doesn't just apply to oral English.
Yeah.
Okay, so speech acts are further divided into three separate phenomena, or dimensions, I should say. The first one being locutionary act, which is the basic act of the utterance itself, the production of meaningful linguistic expression.
Right.
Okay, and when we form an utterance with some kind of function in mind, this is known as an illocutionary act.
Yep.
Okay. So it could be said that a certain force exists behind some utterances, such as a statement or an offer.
Right.
So they differ in terms of their force behind them.
So if we brought this back to our little role play at the start, when I was saying it, what was I trying to do in that case? I was saying, could you do your homework, please?
Yeah. Only the speaker would know that. Well,
yes.
The speaker would initially know that and hopefully convey that.
But what would that be an example of in terms of the acts, in terms of the things you just said?
What act would you be performing? It's kind of a request.
It's
I guess.
more of an order.
Order, yeah.
Command.
Yeah.
It's a request, but it's an order,
strong
essentially.
request,
Yeah.
But the hearer, or Matt, or the learner, maybe heard that wrong.
Yeah. I interpret it as a question of ability, or
Right.
And these are obviously some of the. Well, this is where it kind of overlaps into language teaching and the importance in language teaching.
Yeah.
Because sometimes speech acts can be direct or indirect, as that is an example of.
Yeah.
And this is perhaps the next stage of speech acts too.
Yeah. Also, the way that I was saying that, could you do your homework, please? it's kind of indirect because it is a command,
Yeah.
but it's not in the form of a command.
Yeah.
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 It's interesting. Another example is the word sure. So
Right.
what do you think the word sure means?
It depends.
Okay, right.
Well, it could be,
Like a dictionary definition.
could be acknowledgements.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, a dictionary definition would mean like
Certainty.
certain, yeah,
something
or
like that,
definite
yeah.
or something.
What I notice is I often use sure as a kind of slightly guarded yes.
Yeah, I've
Somebody asks
noticed
me
you do that as well.
somebody do something, I say sure. And so I noticed my daughter my 4-year-old uses it, uses the word sure when she doesn't really want to say yes.
Right.
But she doesn't know she hasn't picked up on the correct intonation, so she'll say sure. And then she'll qualify it by saying, but I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
That kind
All
of
right,
thing.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's an example of an indirect speech act,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. And Brian Paltridge provides a description of an indirect speech act.
Right.
Indirect speech acts, the speaker communicates to the hearer more than he actually or she actually says, by way of relying on their mutually shared background information. Both linguistic and non-linguistic, together with the general powers of rationality and inference on the part of the hearer.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might be invited to a party,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
and the person inviting you might say, bring a plate.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, we know that doesn't actually mean bring an empty plate.
Does it not?
Doesn't mean bring an empty plate.
It
They
means
didn't say bring an empty
It means
plate.
bring some food,
Yeah,
perhaps.
of
Bring
course.
something with
Could
you.
be a bowl. Could
Yeah.
be,
I've been committing a terrible social faux pas for all these years.
Your friends have way too many of your plates.
And again, in this particular speech, it takes the form of an order,
Uh-huh.
a statement. So bring a plate, but
Yeah.
actually it's a request.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
Right.
again, there's another
Right.
dimension there to that as well.
Yeah.
Also, if you're on the way to the party and maybe perhaps you ring up the host and say, "Can I bring anything?" The host reply usually is to say, "No, don't worry, just yourself."
Yeah.
However, you should probably bring wine or flour
Yeah,
in
right,
some
right.
context.
So it's also cultural.
So it's also perhaps a socio-cultural element to this as well. And this is why it may be important for learners to be aware of speech acts,
Oh yeah.
especially when communicating with in common native or non-native speakers, for
Yeah.
example. So what do you think the applications are to the language classroom in terms of speech acts?
Yeah. I think a lot of people now kind of accept that has huge implications that will, with communicative language teaching, where the focus is on actually allowing our students to communicate in
Yeah.
the target language, and using nothing but literal statements is not going to get them very far. So they do need to know about the
Yeah.
speech acts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's also it's a very good opportunity to problematize things in the classroom. So you can draw students' attention to the fact that that just using these literal statements isn't enough by showing them the kind of problems it could cause socially in their lives.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to draw their attention to the things that they need to know behind the language as well as the language itself.
So it seems like most researchers have come down on the fence of they want to teach awareness of speech acts, but not actually teach speech act theory itself,
Okay.
basically. And Fujimori in 2004 talked about 3 steps: conscious raising, knowledge building, and then productive development,
Right.
perhaps like you just talked about, basically.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's today's TEFL pioneers, John Searle and John Austin.
TEFL cultures.
This week's TEFL culture is, it's accelerated language acquisition.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
No.
No.
Okay, I kind of made it up, to be honest.
Oh, that's fine.
Unfortunately, somebody has also coined it.
Right.
Kind of, I think it's something called accelerated second language acquisition. What I mean by accelerated language acquisition is kind of an umbrella term. I think it covers maybe 3 different things, which I'll talk about. But basically, this idea of being able to learn a language quickly,
Right.
or kind of super language learning.
Yeah.
And thinking about it, I thought, maybe it falls under 3 categories. The first category would be the things you see on the internet: how to learn a language in 5 days, how to learn a language in 6 months, etc. Have you come across any of these things?
Yeah, loads.
Yeah, and there's also some people on Twitter as well that maybe lay claim to this kind of thing or have their own blogs about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the kind of recent one that I saw was a guy called, I think his name is Chris Lonsdale. And he's like written an article and done a TED Talk. And basically he kind of explains how he has learned languages in 6 months.
Right.
And I guess the idea is he's telling other people that it's possible. What's interesting about this one, maybe the how to learn a language in 5 days, those are just obvious cons or, those kind of things. This one, as far as I can tell, the ideas about language acquisition behind it a lot of them seem to be kind of sound. In his TED Talk, he references crash. He doesn't feel like he's a SLA person. Like he doesn't. Right. I don't think he's done a lot of research in SLA. But obviously he's read about crashing. He's read about comprehensible input. He says, okay, that's one of the things I'm going to focus on.
Okay.
So he came up with 5 principles and 7 actions. Things like listening a lot, getting a lot of comprehensible input, focus on the meaning first, be creative with the language, focused on high frequency words, get somebody somebody fluent in the target language who can speak to you, and bring you along, scaffold you.
Right.
He talks about how pronunciation is a physical thing, so watch how native speakers face moves and copy all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All these kinds of things, which I think are, good.
Yeah.
And so for me, this area of what I'm calling accelerated language acquisition is basically like looking at sound principles, but the problem there is claiming it can be done in 6 months.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It may well be that he has learned languages in 6 months through doing this.
Yeah. I feel that a lot of the time when people make these kinds of claims, they tend to be people who are very, very good at learning languages, and they extrapolate their own natural ability to acquire languages out to everyone else.
Yeah.
So I remember reading a website that said, why Japanese is very easy actually, and it was giving all these reasons. But I was thinking, but it's not easy. Like I know all that stuff already. It's still not easy, So I think that's kind of one of the issues. People, Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So actually, that kind of connects to the second type that I want to talk about, which is these what they call hyper polyglots. These people who, again, you occasionally see articles about them in the newspaper. People who say they can, speak 50 languages, whatever. And often, like, if you read the article, like, of course, one of the interview questions is always, so what advice do you have for other language learners? And they say things like, study lots of grammar and vocabulary. That's what I did, and now I can speak these languages. And, I think in that case, it's just like you were saying. For some reason, their brains work in a way that allow them to acquire language that way. They always focus on their reading ability. And they also claim that they have interactional competence, but I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see some of those people, because I've never actually seen them. A lot of them, I've never seen them actually use the languages.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's all their claims.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Have you heard of speed learning?
Yes. Right.
I'm not sure if this is a worldwide thing, but certainly in Japan on cable TV, they advertise this speed learning CD.
Yeah.
And they have all these, like, say, testimonies, all these people that really work for them, kind of thing. But there's no actual. I'm not sure what it is exactly. I'd like to actually buy it and just see for myself what it is actually.
Right.
Yeah. But they in the adverts themselves, they seem to focus on speaking. They always show people speaking really fluently with other people, and
or they show celebrities.
Celebrities as well,
saying something in English in an interview.
They also. I've even seen scholars kind of trying to hawk this idea. Like there's a way of learning the Japanese writing system, which lots of people like, and it seems to work for lots of people. I've tried it; it doesn't really work for me. Yeah. But I've got the book that the guy wrote, and he's a professor of Japanese language education, and he said if you make a full-time job of doing this, then you should be able to learn it. You should be able to learn all of the kanji in 6 months. Like, if you make a full-time job of it, so if I spend 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, just doing kanji repetition, but then I could be doing that without his method. I'd probably still learn all the kanji.
Any method would probably work at that point.
There seems to be comparisons between language learning and going to the gym.
Yes,
actually
right, right.
toning up, becoming bigger, losing
yeah.
weight, learning a language. It kind of seems the natural extension of that.
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
like,
that's
often.
true.
How it's advertised, anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like you were talking about with the speed learning, which is popular in Japan, I'm sure you've heard of Rosetta Stone, the software,
Yeah, yeah.
which I think is a similar thing. As far as I can tell, the speed learning is just lots and lots of input, listening input, but it's not interactional, just you listen to a recording.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And it's, there's target sentences, they repeat them, they what's the term called?
Shadowing?
Backtracking? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, they start at the end of the sentence and then add words to the end.
Oh, right.
Backchaining?
Chaining, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Those kinds of things, and yeah, like you were saying, often the literature that goes with it talks about, this is how children learn languages. They hear they get lots of input, and so you can also learn a language like this.
Yeah.
So they're playing on that misconception that first language acquisition is similar to second language acquisition.
Yeah. So I mean, do you find do you think there's any truth behind any of these claims at all?
Not really. I mean, like I said, yeah. I think what it comes down to is probably if you did a lot of these things enough, you'd get some gains from it.
Yeah.
I think just listening to a CD or just using software, which doesn't contain any real interaction, is only going to take you so far.
Right.
You're not gonna, if somebody's, if you at a party and have to use the language, you're probably not going to do so well.
Yeah. So is there actually any difference between these methods and the methods that get sold in textbooks and things? Because I mean, if the basic idea is, as long as you're doing something and you do it enough, you will learn, then is there really any difference?
Yeah, I wonder. Well, I mean, that would be interesting. I guess the key part of a lot of these things is that they're trying to sell them on this idea of you can learn a language quickly, which is obviously very appealing to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even within, like, even when we were going, when our business, when our industry was going through this, all these different designer methods and methodologies, it felt like the goal was, somewhere out there is the perfect method.
Right.
And if we just find it, everybody can learn a language. We just apply this method to everybody, and it'll work.
Yeah.
We're kind of past that now. But I think what's come out of that is this acknowledgement by everybody that time is one of the key elements of learning a language. You can't really get around that.
Yeah. I mean, in what context would time be of the essence if you're, like people on these TV commercials, obviously, they often seem hurried in some way, but do they really need to be
Well, that's
hurried?
true.
Or?
Yeah, no, it's just people. It's probably people who don't like learning languages and so don't want to.
They want to get it without the work.
Exactly.
Or,
maybe that's more part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Vocabulary Myths, the Keith Folse book, he says that, kind of in the conclusion, I think, he says, what we know about people learning vocabulary is that the best vocabulary learners, they have a strategy, and they use it consistently and regularly. And I wonder if that is more generalizable to language learning, like in general.
Yeah.
You have whatever strategy you use, as long as you use it regularly, as long as you use it, consistently, then you're going to improve.
Right, but in acquiring vocabulary in that way, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define that kind of vocabulary acquisition.
Right,
Could you do well on a written test, or can you drop it into conversation or that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well.
So, anyway, I think probably something we all know that speed learning is not possible for languages, at least. So anyway, that's this week's TEFL culture.
TEFL News.
Today's TEFL News is the incredible opportunities available to people to go and teach English in North Korea that have opened up.
Oh, great.
So, just on the surface, how does that sound to you, going to teach English in North Korea?
Extremely interesting.
Okay.
I'd love to do it.
Why? Why is that?
Well, I mean, I was saying to someone the other day, I'd love to go to North Korea before it changes. Because one day it will change, it will open up perhaps. Not anytime soon, but
Right.
I'd like to go there. But a disadvantage would be I don't want to be paid by the regime, which is what may be happening.
Well, actually...
But anyway, don't skip ahead.
I'll come back to that in a minute. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it does sound interesting to see a part of the world most people don't get to see, to interact with North Koreans.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't have to interact with the starving, half-dead North Koreans, because they wouldn't be the ones that are put in front of you to teach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have like a 3-month limit.
Right. Well, actually, yes. So this would be there would be 1 month placements.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, 1 month. You would be going to Pyongyang Tourism College, and you'd either be teaching English or helping the guides interact better with foreign visitors. So you'd basically be teaching English, or you'd be teaching tour guides,
skills.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So this is being offered by Juche Travel Services. Do you know Juche?
No.
It's the kind of the ideology, the sort of the semi-communist ideology invented by Kim Il Sung. So that everything is Juche in North Korea.
Okay.
So it's Juche Travel Services, which is actually a UK tour operator. Which
you mean it's a UK company?
It's a UK company, yeah.
Okay.
But it organises travel, I think, between China and North Korea. I'm not sure exactly. But they've organised this teaching opportunity. Any applicants who want to do this should have a TEFL qualification or previous experience in tourism management, which is actually higher standards than most most TEFL jobs.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why they've put that limit on.
Maybe they can be selective. Maybe they assume enough people want to do it that they can be selective.
I reckon a lot of people would apply to this.
Yeah, well, they've actually there are 5 places available in May and 5 places available in November, but they've already received. So this the story that I'm from the Telegraph, the story that I'm referencing was published on the 22nd of January, and at that point they already had 50 applications.
Okay.
So now they must have a lot more now that the word's out.
Yeah.
Now, you were saying that you wouldn't want to be paid by the regime. It turns out that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Because you would have to pay €1,000 to volunteer to teach there.
So you wouldn't get paid?
You wouldn't get paid.
So it's a voluntary?
Well, no.
It's not even voluntary. You pay for the privilege of going there.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. The €1,000 covers your travel from Beijing to Pyongyang. You get a North Korean visa, accommodation, and trips around the country, and all of your meals.
Okay.
So
That's
it does.
not bad.
Yeah, it's all right for
It's a
1,000.
holiday.
Yeah.
It's a holiday, but you do have to work.
You do have to work.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so does that sound any more appealing now that you've got more of the details?
Yeah, I mean, it still sounds as appealing. I don't think, I wouldn't imagine you would do it for the money. And if it includes trips around the country, why not?
Would-
€1,000 for a months-long holiday?
Yeah. What does that mean?
You were hoping to be raking in the big...
I'm sure there's other caveats. I'm sure you have to take
one.
extra money. I've heard if you go to North Korea, you have to take a certain amount of euros to pay people, basically.
I think it'll be a little bit different because
cigarettes and whiskey and that kind of thing.
I think it'll probably be a little bit different because you'd be there providing a service. I think you'd probably actually get treated very well as like as TEFL teachers, we're pretty used to being treated like rubbish. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, do you have any concerns politically about going there? Because I've always, I really want to go to North Korea. I'm fascinated by it. I read loads of books about it. But I don't want to be involved in economically supporting the regime, because in those books I read about all the terrible human rights abuses and concentration camps they've got.
Yeah.
Do you have any concerns in that area?
Yes, I suppose. But at the same time, it seems, maybe like any kind of education, and especially intercultural education, which you could describe teaching English as, may do some good towards opening the country up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I assume that the more North Koreans who speak English, the better.
Right, but I mean, do you think you'd be able to get involved in any kind of intercultural communication? I get the feeling that it would be much more helping them to explain about their country to visitors.
Yeah, very much so. But I think just the fact of using English is what I mean by intercultural.
They kind of have the same thing in Japan, don't they, where English is being used as a way to promote Japaneseness. What's the Japanese word for that? Kokusaika?
Kokusaika is internationalization.
Okay, well, the kind of the opposite to that. But using English in a way to
Nationalisation.
promote, in a way, I get to promote Japaneseness around the world. I mean, that's one intention of English in Japan, I guess, for people to go abroad and speak about Japan.
Right.
Yeah. There was a big step I think they took was for a long time Japan's tourism slogan was Yokoso Japan,
Yeah.
which nobody in anybody who they're appealing to understands what that means.
Yeah.
Seems like
Most of the people who live here still don't understand what that means.
Also, NHK World, it's not about the world, it's about Japan in the world. They're just talking about Japan. NHK World's a TV channel,
Right.
For those of you.
Yeah.
Not
It's
in
for
the-
all of you.
It's broadcast. It's broadcast around the world.
It's broadcast around the world, but it's all about Japan. It's not
Yeah.
a world. It's
There's
not like
enough
Al
of those.
Jazeera, for
Yeah,
example.
but maybe that's
So-
why it is about Japan, because it's broadcast around the world. I mean, you do have TV channels in Japan that are about the world as well. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's another issue is that if I was going to go and teach in North Korea, that it wouldn't be, I wouldn't be able to teach in a way that I would be comfortable teaching. I think you'd be very limited in how you can teach, I imagine.
Do they say anything about the methodology that you would be expected to use?
No, but as they say, that you need a TEFL qualification. Now, I don't know if that's because they want people who are trained in TEFL or if they just are putting a cap on it,
Sure.
so they get people who can teach a little bit.
Yeah.
I wonder what
probably.
materials they'd use, because obviously North Korea is restricted in how they can see the world.
Yeah.
So maybe the other materials can be made in Korea.
I would assume
North Korea.
so. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know enough about the typical North Korean, or I imagine the people you're teaching, like I said before, probably in the slightly higher class of North Korea. Upper class.
The Pyongyang residents.
Right. I still imagine that they would be very. I imagine they'd be great students. They'd be eager to learn, whether by force or by, self-interest, or I don't know. But I imagine they'd be interesting classes.
Yeah, they do have a university that teaches in English, and Americans and someone can go over there and teach. And I saw a documentary about it, and the students did seem very eager.
Yeah.
But they also seemed very nationalistic, as you might expect.
Right.
Yeah. So I think they'd be. They'd
that's
be good
fine.
students, but it might be a little bit disheartening if you were going to teach there, because whatever your ideology, it would probably clash with theirs.
Yeah.
Although I imagine the stereotypical view of most North Koreans is that they all believe one thing and follow the same way. I imagine teaching them, you would very quickly realize you're in a classroom full of
Sure.
10 or 12 or however many very different people.
Yeah.
I think it would humanize them a lot more.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you find it hard to go there and not kind of tell them about what else is going on in the world and what democracy is? And
The
I'm sure-
one-way mirror,
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
I
sure
think
they're warned about don't go there giving your beliefs about things. Just kind of accept. And
but to be fair, which I think all TEFL teachers do, no matter where they teach.
they should.
I mean,
Yeah.
you'd be teaching tour guides who interact with foreign visitors. So, I mean, I'm assuming these are people who are already prepared to interact with foreigners, and foreigners who are under less close safeguards because they're there as tourists, as guests. So I imagine that these are people who are already prepared to be exposed to Western culture, but probably still don't like it.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
So they haven't actually, no one's gone over yet to teach English?
Not
Or-
yet. Well, people have gone over to teach English,
Right.
which actually is a little preview for next podcast.
Okay.
But not on this program.
I see.
This hasn't started to be run yet. It's starting in May.
Okay.
So for our listeners, if anyone would like to go and teach English in North Korea, you can contact the Juice Travel Services. Send them your CV. You might be in with a chance. Good luck.
And we'll interview you when you come back.
Yes, and you can be our TEFL
Be
pioneer.
careful with interviews in North Korea, because there was that whole hacking.
Not the interview, an interview.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's today's TEFL news.
Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode.
If you'd like to get in contact with us, please send an email to teflology@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter @teflology.
So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
reading on. So we'll edit this.
No, I'll edit this.
It's alright, we'll edit this out.
Stop saying that.